Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. I need a new foam on my microphone. I'm sitting here looking at this one. It's a bit tatty. Yeah, got to get me some brand new foam. But where? Where do you get foam these days? There's the Foam Hut. That's on Third. Foam R Us. That's also on Third. Yeah, I'll go down to the Foam District this weekend and get myself some brand new foam for my microphone, because Arsenal are not playing this weekend. We have a Premier League weekend. The season has just returned and we're not playing until Monday night. Crystal Palace away from home, which of course was the first game of last season, the first away game of last season too. One of those where it was something of a marker for Arsenal, if you remember, because, things hadn't gone well there in the past. And then we turned up and won 2-0, and it set us on our way for what was a really, really enjoyable season for, 91% of it, or 87%. I haven't worked out the percentages yet, but a lot of it. So we're hoping for a bit more of that come Monday night. We'll just have to spend the weekend, I don't know, doing all the stuff you promised you'd do around the house but haven't got around to yet because you've had too many podcasts to listen to. The gardening, clean out the garage, go to the Foam District, all of those things. That's what we're going to have to do to pass the time until Monday night. Another way to pass the time, I suppose, would be to listen to this podcast. And it has been a bit of a sad week, of course, given the injury to Jurrien Timber, an ACL injury, which is going to keep him out for some time. But there is still time for Arsenal to do something in the transfer market if they so desire, or if they have the means to do so. Will they? I don't know. We've also brought in a player this week. Officially, David Raya has joined on loan from Brentford with a view to a permanent deal somewhere down the line, probably next summer. So that's something we'll talk about. And this general transfer stuff, there is the increasing influence of the Saudi Arabian league on the transfer market here. And it's not as if Arsenal are immune to that. We'll talk about that and lots more. With me to do so, it's Clive Palmer. Hello, Clive.
Hello, Andrew. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, man. I'm good. Good to see you again. Good to have you on. And, for people who need a bit more Clive in their lives, this is it this week. So...
I missed you guys in the US though, didn't I? Live.
You did. You did it. Listen, I'll be honest with you. It was absolutely no fun whatsoever without you. So
I saw the pictures of the beach. Right, stop trying to make me feel good.
Well, next time, for sure, for sure. We'll start with a sort of a bum note, obviously, because the big story this week has been the injury to Jurrien Timber. Suspected ACL, then a confirmed ACL. I suppose the one thing you might say is that based on some of the reporting that came out this afternoon, there was a guy from Sky Sports did a report from the training ground. He said he'd been talking to some of the medical staff, and that the injury that he's got is a tear to the cruciate. It's not like a complete rupture or anything like that. So I suppose it's bad, obviously, and it's a blow, as Mikel Arteta said, but it could have been worse.
It could have been, and maybe to me and you, just walking around, having a issue like that may not require an operation. We may just build up the knee and go from there. But these elite sportsmen, unlike me, Andrew, I think would require a little bit more surgery than that.
It's a bit like putting money into like a really, really old house or a really old car. When you've got a new one, you could just buy a new one. I don't think we're worth the investment at this point.
No, just getting back out to work. As simple as that. And so yeah, that may explain some of the... the guy in Sky sort of spoke to the fact that he was walking around, felt very little pain. And when you've got big, strong muscles around your quads and hamstrings, your knee is quite stable. That's what you do. That's what you do the work for, right? So, and so he no doubt passed the stability test they did, and then he felt quite good. And obviously, once you get into the scan, they show the partial sort of tear, etc. So, a real shame, right? And it's not just... We all love new players, right? But he seems like a really nice guy. Do you know what I mean? He feels like someone we all could link to. And more importantly, other players in the club seem to link to him. And on the tactical side of things, he offers so many different options on different days. Yeah. I think that's the thing that's really sort of we haven't seen him yet, if you know what I mean. We haven't seen him properly.
Yeah.
I think when we first got him, Andrew, I was thinking right back, maybe allows Ben White to cover centre back.
Yeah.
I'm thinking right side of the pitch. First game, right side of the pitch, he was all right. But when he went left side of the pitch, we all went, that looks better, and then,
yeah.
But it's still very early, right? So we haven't seen the player really land. So it's very disappointing.
I do wonder if we would have seen him on the left if, Zinchenko had been fit, for example, and maybe it's a case that in these preseason games, my theory, half-baked as it might be, was that he was playing out there, one, because Zinchenko wasn't available. Two, he knew what Kieran Tierney can do there. He knew what Kivior could do there.
Yeah.
But three, he wanted to get minutes into Timber because he knows that this is a player whose level can do things for the team, right? So he wanted him fit. He wanted him 100% fit or as fit as possible so he could start the season. Lo and behold, he did start the season again at left back. And like you, when he came in, I had this idea of on the left we would have this little triumvirate of Kivior, Zinchenko and Gabriel. And on the right you would have this triumvirate of Saliba, White and Timber. And then you have Tomiyasu as the guy who can do anything. He can fit in anywhere. But based on what we did see from Timber in the short period of time that we did get to see him on the pitch, you would feel very comfortable with him playing on the left-hand side. And I remember when we did our preview podcast over on Patreon, I'm not saying this is what would happen or could happen, but Phil Costa, talked about how he could see Timber playing more advanced. Not necessarily in the back four, but certainly somebody who could potentially play in midfield as part of it too, perhaps. And look, I'm not saying that that's what Arteta had in mind, but the amount of variety that he gave you in terms of positions he could play was like a big, high-quality safety net, wasn't it, in many ways, because he could do all of those things and you knew that he could do them at a very high level.
He's like a higher quality Maitland-Niles, right? Literally. Imagine that type of player when he first burst in. He could play in midfield, either side, and slightly higher up, right? So that's just people are going to kill me now for mentioning that name because he's left the club. But when he first came in, he was that very versatile player that couldn't land in a spot. When you see Timber on the ball, he is excellent wherever the ball is. So whether he's back to goal, facing goal, left wing, right wing, centre mid, centre back, any spot on the pitch, he seems to look okay there. So when you see that, when you're looking at the YouTubes and your White Scout, etc., when you're looking at that, you do what Phil's done, you extrapolate forward and think, I wonder if we could use him here, I wonder if we can use him there, which adds to disappointment. We haven't seen him anywhere else yet. You see what I mean? Yeah. We haven't seen the tactical options being realised yet. And football is becoming, though, Andrew, far more about one-on-ones. One-on-ones physically and technically, and that's where I think he really stood up. I went to Charity Shield, one-on-ones on that day, no problem. No problem whatsoever. And he was barely fit. If he can handle them, he can handle anybody. That was the thing that really excited me, and that's why I was so gutted this week. And more than I am normally about an injury. I don't know why. This one sort of really hit me a little bit because I think we're really missing out on potential options. And
yeah, it's not just the fact that he gave you depth in the squad. It's the fact that he looked like a really, really good player. And I know that, quite often when a player comes into a club, you only look at the good things they can do. A new signing, he comes in, you go, look what he does there, look what he does there. And then over time, you get to know the player a bit and their strengths and weaknesses become apparent. But there's no question that this guy technically was excellent in the little time that we saw him. He's an excellent defender across both sides and was very good, of course, for Ajax, which is why we went out and spent all that money on him. So I'm with you. I feel really, really sorry for him that it's happened so soon into his Arsenal career. And then, of course, we're all worrying about, well, what happens now? Where do we go from here? What is the contingency plan here? And of course, Arteta was asked about it in the press conference today. Asked about, is the club thinking about going into the market? And he was, giving very little away. the practical side of this, right, is that you've signed a player for 5 years who's going to be out for 6-7 months, maybe a bit more, hopefully no more than that. And you have invested in that player for at least that period of time because you feel like he can bring something to your team. And there will be a fair amount of clamour to do something else in the transfer market to try and make up for his absence. And I'm just wondering about how realistic you think that is. Currently a squad with 33 players in it, maybe a few less now in a couple of days. Alex Runarsson has been linked with a move to Cardiff, not that anybody's thinking too much about him. Nuno Tavares linked with Nottingham Forest. Again, not somebody people were necessarily counting on as an option, even though he is, on paper anyway, a left back or a left-sided defender, so he could provide you that kind of a thing. But Arsenal have a squad that's too big. And James made a really interesting point in his latest video about the structure of the deal for David Raya is in part because we've spent a lot this summer and haven't brought a great deal in and need to kick that financial can down the road a little bit. So it doesn't seem to me like there's a lot of cash sloshing around there for a new player, not least because there isn't really space in the squad for a new player until we get some players out anyway. And we can talk about that, I suppose, in a moment. But, how do you deal with that side of things? Like if you go out and you buy another player, an analogue of Jurrien Timber, in 6 months or 7 months' time, you've got two of them. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing because the more options you have, the better. But the reality is that sometimes you just have to deal with a player being absent with what you've got rather than the market itself.
Yeah, in a strange way, this sort of puts a bit of pressure on a couple of players in our squad right now. And that is, for me, Tomiyasu.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially Kiwior, maybe less so, but Tomiyasu definitely. And I'll tell you why. And it's actually Andrew Allen that triggered my thought on this, actually, because he sent out a tweet earlier today. I hope it's accurate. It said, we got African nations and the Asia Cup in January.
Mm.
And that means we're going to potentially lose Thomas Partey and Tomiyasu. So we may not need to do something right now. But in January, in maybe a new financial fair play window, we can do something and should do something and may need to do something.
Mm.
Now, depending on the form of a Tomiyasu, we may say, you know what, you've done okay, but maybe we're not offering you a new contract. So we're going to buy somebody that complements a returning Timber and maybe puts Tomiyasu under more pressure, for example.
Mm.
If Kiwior's kicking it in his own net, maybe we'll look at that and say, you know what, maybe we do need another lefty. In there. So I think who can play both sides centre-back sort of thing. So I think if I'm the club right now, obviously we all want to see our squad as fulsome as possible. And with new players coming in, all the players we want to be sold at the exact prices that we want to be sold in a timely fashion. Thank you very much. It doesn't seem to be happening like that right now. It feels a little bit edgy. So I would hold till January and then reassess at that point. And Arteta he intimated today, didn't he, mate? He sort of said, my job is to get the most out of the players that we have, which is a classic coach response, He flips between coach and manager very seamlessly, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the environment side of things, you hear the manager side of him. When he's talking about players, you hear the coaching side of him. I think he's a very, very clever man. So I would hold for now until January. But January comes and that's when you reassess and see you are in the league and go, right, we've got to press the button because we have a chance here, which we all feel anyway right now. Mm. But we have a real chance and we know exactly where we are.
He was asked, was it an opportunity for Kieran Tierney? And he said it's an opportunity for everybody in the squad. Again, a classic Arteta answer, deflecting, not really giving anything away. And I was really curious to see the stories about Newcastle going after this Chelsea left back.
Lewis Hall. Yeah.
So the story was Newcastle can't afford to pay anything for Kieran Tierney. They won't take him on loan with an option, similar kind of maybe deal that we have done for David Raya. We'll talk about him in a minute. But that was the story. FFP, Newcastle, despite being the richest club on the planet, have to abide by FFP rules, or at least be seen to abide by FFP rules. And they can't pay what Arsenal want for Kieran Tierney, but they can pay something in the ballpark of what Arsenal wanted for Kieran Tierney for a kid with, a handful of professional appearances to his name. Now, that might be in large part to do with what Newcastle want, what kind of a player they want, how they're building their squad, how they view the construction of their squad going forward, to invest in the potential of a young English player now and, reap the benefits down the line, whatever it might be. But, does it say anything to you about the stock of Kieran Tierney right now among other Premier League clubs? Because I have to say, despite the fact I think Arsenal as a sort of tactical team have outgrown Kieran Tierney or have sort of left him behind a little bit, not every club in the Premier League plays like this. And there are plenty of clubs in the Premier League who could do with a really good traditional, if you want to call it that, like that, left back. So have you been surprised, that there hasn't been more interest in him? And B, do you think that he could provide something of a safety net until we get to that January point, at which stage we assess where we are?
He can do provide a safety net, but I'm not sure. I think stylistically, Andrew, what we do in our back five now, our five back and our five up, I just think he's somebody that wants to traverse between the two too much. And we don't want that on that side of the pitch. We want something else. And so we want control. We want people that can counter press. We want people to stay in their places until they know when to leave it. And he plays with his heart on his sleeve, right? He disappears and he puts big bang crosses in and big tackles and big clearances and channel balls, right? And there are teams that love that. Aston Villa would like that. That could be a rumour. I do think people are being a little bit smarter around squad building. When we bought all the kids 2-3 years ago, people laughed at us overpaying for players, etc. But actually, look at our squad value now. We have nearly the most valuable squad in the world on paper because their ages and their contract lengths and where they are, all 24, 25. So maybe Newcastle, they're not just going for Hall, but they also bought Tino Livramento from Southampton, who's a kid that came out of Chelsea. I think Arsenal would have had him if he didn't do his cruciate a couple of years ago. He just came back to health and fitness and they've paid for him. Probably overpaid for him. But when Trippier comes out of that team, they've got a ready-made replacement. And he is an England-level player in a couple of years' time. So I think it's very smart squad building. For me, I'm thinking Kieran Tierney, Newcastle, 30 million, thank you very much. He works for you right now. But they're thinking, can we get away with Dan Burn and Matt Target and have a youngster and build him up, sell one of those older players eventually, and then have a young player with a Premier League minutes in his back pocket, and suddenly that money becomes 60 million very, very quickly. We've seen it, haven't we, recently with Caicedo? Look what happens. 40 games, 4 million to 115 very quickly.
It's hard to sort of square the circle of, those prices and the way Chelsea are operating. But that is the reality of what's going on in this market. I have to say, this part of me is going, Jesus, every other club is selling fucking everyone for all kinds of prices. And we are,
apart from us,
we are really struggling. And it's not as if, some of the play. That was the thing about this summer is you're not trying to sell your Mustafis and Socrateses. You're trying to sell a Kieran Tierney, a Rob Holding, a player who, while they might not be creme de la creme, is certainly good enough to play for most but many Premier League clubs, and those offers don't appear to be materialising. So,
do you think it's just the way these things are being managed? Do you think we're just managing it a lot more closely, or do you think there's just zero happening? Because I'm 50-50 on it, mate, to be honest, but
I don't know. I've been, like pretty much everybody else, really encouraged by the way we have changed our recruitment and brought players in. And I think we've we've ramped it up, of course, this summer, where we've said, right, we're going to go and get a big boy. We're going to go and play. We're going to fish for sharks. And, we did that, and we held off someone like Manchester City to get Declan Rice, which I think is a huge statement. But where I was looking for, more maybe this summer was the departure lounge. Who's going to go? What are we going to get for them? What prices are we going to bring in? And that's valuable. That's important because, something like this does happen, right? So you sell well and you have an unfortunate situation where Timber has his injury and you're like, well, fuck. But at least we've got that money and that money and that money and that money, which means we can maybe push a little bit. And I do wonder if, the next couple of weeks might tell us something about what's going to happen in that regard.
Yep. My saying is, the world changes in a tweet, mate. A tweet comes in from the right person, and suddenly we have clarity, don't we? And that's how we're all living at the moment. Scroll, refresh, and we're just waiting for the news that we quite like. So
we're waiting. We're waiting for the Orn bomb, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And I do think this market is probably harder than most to read due to the Saudi Arabia factor, which I'm sure we'll touch on.
So, we'll come to that. I mean, so does now a triumvirate of Tomiyasu, White, Saliba on the right, Kivior, Gabriel, and Zinchenko on the left, with players like Thomas Partey, even Declan Rice, who can drop back into that back line, does that give you enough depth at the back to get to January without compromising what you want to do in midfield, if you should need to do it?
I'd like to say yes, but there's a couple of high risk factors there, isn't there? And Zinchenko played mid-20s games last year. Tomiyasu, unlucky with injury. I'm loath to call him injury prone because he did his calf, didn't he? And we dragged him back a bit quick. And they did it again. And then when he came back, he was just finding a bit of form. And he literally slipped over on the turf and did his knee, right? So different injury. I'm hoping that the timeout has allowed him to rebalance himself and get himself back to the player that when he arrived, he had a similar impact as Timber almost in our minds, And we're quick to forget, aren't we? We're quick to forget how impressive he was when he came in. And he does perform a lot of those roles in a slightly different way. But as I keep saying, it's important that, for me anyway, when I look at football, mate, shut the back door. Make sure you can defend. If you can defend properly, we've got enough ability to create and score the goals we need to score. The only time I get worried, I know it sounds very rudimentary, but when we start conceding twos, I'm not happy. Right? That means we've lost our stability. And when we have it, we're a really good side. And so Tomiyasu can play a role in that. I'm convinced he can do that until Christmas, and then we go again.
All right. Well, we'll see. I mean, the market is open for basically another 2 weeks, I think. And it'll close September 1st, I think. So we'll find out. And hopefully they can move some players on. But we did make another addition to the squad this week. Officially, David Raya was brought in. And I think it was interesting to listen to Arteta today, particularly in relation to, in the context of, I should say, the Timber injury. And he was asked about Raya. And he said, if it happened to Jurrien Timber, it can happen to our goalkeeper. You need to be prepared because the question will be, if you've got two goalkeepers of this quality, if Aaron is to sustain a cruciate injury, then what do you say? And he said the reason he brought him into the squad was better qualities for our game model. It's very simple. That was the first line of his answer. And I was a bit like, ooh, is he talking about Ramsdale here? But no, he's talking, I think about Matt Turner and how interchangeable, I suppose, Raya and Ramsdale would be when it comes to the style of play that we want to implement, And obviously, I think they're different goalkeepers in some ways, different strengths, different weaknesses, etc., etc. But when it comes to ball at the feet, keeping possession at the back, maybe sparking some long passes, counterattacks, those kinds of things, you can see how they do. But it is an interesting point, isn't it? Because if your goalkeeper picks up an injury, and Ramsdale, I believe, played through injury last season. Didn't he break a finger during the World Cup or something like that in training in the World Cup? And he played, with a broken finger for parts of the season. It gives you that safety net, that security. And there are questions, I think, about the load being placed on players that goalkeepers perhaps have been more or less immune to, but Courtois obviously did his last week or the week before. So there are victims, if you want to call it that, of the schedule from front to back. So do you think that might have played a part in the thinking of this?
I think Arteta's talking to us, Andrew, and we need to start listening, mate. I think the end of season lessons learned meeting, I would have loved to have been in that, because if you were anywhere near the ground when we lost to Brighton, it was very, very obvious how disappointed people were and how things can quickly change. And if you're the manager of a football club and you're heading in the right direction, you look at your squad and you want to de-risk it. You want to de-risk it in every position that you can and lift the quality. If you want to change a culture from being a culture of let's put our principles in place, let's understand how we all want to live, and the last phase of that is now we want to win. How do you do that? And you do that by creating a level of competition everywhere, and apps everywhere, not some places and keep your favourites nice and happy, everywhere. And I think the Ramsdale Raya thing, for me, was an opportunity to make the squad stronger and put somebody under pressure and set an example about where we're going. Right? So someone who's been invested in, has a new contract, has a 4 or 5 year in his back pocket. So not as if the club don't like him. There's a market opportunity with David Raya, because that goalkeeper is still cheap at 30 million. Right? So whatever happens, the club is protected financially. It's also protected on the field from how we play. There's another aspect to this, and I think something I had a little rant earlier about is about how we analyse goalkeeping positions. We have this thing where, the goalkeeper must always play. He must always play. And I think to myself, why? Why must the goalkeeper always play? I've seen Ramsdale, when he's been overplayed, play for England and throw 4 in, right, against Hungary. I've seen it when he shouldn't have played the end of the season, and I've seen him when he's not been mentally right to play a game. Why are we treating this position so starkly differently? With the way the game is, the way the goalkeepers are used now to create overloads at the base of your team, they're playing, a lot of them, out on pitch a lot, having plenty of touches. And the way we want to play, you want a goalkeeper higher up to really be part of our base pod of our team. Why can't we do this? Why can't we every now and again change a goalkeeper? I think we have to change our mindsets to where the game is going. And I think the goalkeeper rules changing with the no one allowed in the penalty box, the game changed for a goalkeeper. It just changed. And our analysis of that position and how it could be used, I think lacks a bit of maturity, and myself included in that. And I think we need to grow our minds around what a goalkeeper can do for your team, can do distribution-wise. And I think eventually we'll all start to think about having 2 high-quality goalkeepers, and why not? And it will become much more normal thinking than it is today.
I'm really curious to see if that is the case. I really am. I mean, I feel like part of this is, Ramsdale is a player who, by his own admission, needs the motivation, needs to find the motivation even within games. When he talks about bantering with the opposition fans, and then he switches back on, and he's got these little tricks that help him concentrate within the games, and they work for him because he's got to where he's got because of that. But I don't know if you feel any pressure from Matt Turner. With all due respect to Matt Turner, I don't think you feel that pressure. The debate about whether a goalkeeper should always play or feel comfortable or feel secure or feel reassured by the manager, I do wonder if that comes down to a question of confidence. Yeah. Is that a position where perhaps more than any other, confidence is absolutely key? And it's true of players in every position. If you're confident, you're going to play well. If you're not confident, you're going to struggle at times. But to create that kind of mentality within a squad where, okay, you're our number one goalkeeper. We've given you a 4 or 5 year deal because we really like you, but now rise to this challenge. And if you can do it, brilliant, because that means we get a better goalkeeper. If you can't do it, it means we've got a good goalkeeper who's going to be in there. But I would imagine if that's what Arteta is trying to do, if down the line David Raya is the Arsenal number one, at some point there will be a goalkeeper bought to do exactly the same thing to him.
Yeah. And Ramsdale said it himself, didn't he? He says, I've come in and I've ripped the shirt off people's backs, so why do I think it's not going to happen to me? And this is elite football. I don't think that my goalkeeper scenario works for all clubs, but it does work for clubs in the Champions League and who have international goalkeepers are going off on international squads. I think it can work for those teams, for those 60 game a season teams. I really do think it can. And I think that's what's going to happen a lot more. You can see it. Arteta said in his conference today about the next 36 months as a schedule is just incredible. You know, and something needs to happen, and something does need to happen because everything is expanding. We talk about goalkeepers, Andrew, but I just see them as footballers. You know, and footballers are living in an environment every single day and within that bubble. And it's just going to reach a point when it's going to become unsustainable. You know, and
is it though? Because, you know, that's what people have been saying for a long time. It's, you know, you can't keep playing. You've got to give them time off. And the reality is that the organizations, FIFA, UEFA, the football clubs themselves, they don't. And they won't, because there are commercial demands and there are financial demands or financial opportunities, you know. And I completely agree with Arteta, by the way. You know, it's too late for the next 36 months. You know, the World Cup, the new Champions League schedule, this FIFA Club Cup thing, Europa League, what do you call it? The fucking Conference League, the internationals, the international friendlies, the international tournaments, the preseason tours. When are these players going to get rest? And I realize that for some people listening to this, sympathy is in short supply because, you know, they earn a lot of money, they've got a great life, they play football, and other people are just kind of struggling from day to day. So why should we feel any particular sympathy for footballers? I get that, you know, but at the same time, people who are struggling to make ends meet, part of, you know, their financial outlay every year might be their season ticket, might be the ticket to go and see their football club every week or every couple of weeks at home. And they go and they see a new signing get an ACL on his first appearance, or they go and the quality of the game is diminished because players have been playing all summer, they haven't had any rest, or, you know, across the league and across Europe we've seen lots of injuries in the last couple of weeks, which feel like a direct consequence of the schedule that these players are taking part in. So while I can see why common sense should apply, I don't know how it's going to.
I don't know either. And I don't want to sympathise, but obviously Man City have lost Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, he's going to not go back till next year. And I was watching him play last night in Athens, I think he was, 110 degrees on a Wednesday night, and the league have given them Newcastle on Saturday. Cheers. You know, now obviously we're Arsenal people, right? So we're saying we'll stroll on, deal with that.
Yeah, sure.
But we're also football people, and that could easily be us playing on a Wednesday night in a hot Champions League venue, and our friends at TNT Sports stick us on at 12 o'clock kickoff on Saturday morning. Yeah, and it's happened before.
It's happened before, yeah.
And it's just not right. It's almost like we're not making it fair and equitable, even though we know it's not, if that makes sense.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
It's not fair. It's not fair. If it's Man City, I want the same for everybody, you know. And it isn't going to change. Money talks. People are saying we talked about US earlier on, and a fantastic tour, fantastic for the club. We saw Vinay say that 20% of all retail sales are now coming out of the US market. I love that. How's that grown? How does that happen? That happens by reaching out to those fans. And how do you do that best? By going there. You know, and it was a fantastic experience for all those who went, who really, really enjoyed it. it's very difficult to say, I need to cut some of these games out and then we do that, and then we focus on the League Cup, which is important to the lower league teams in the league. So it's very, very difficult to find that balance. But someone needs to sit down. Then we have the other question, who is that going to be, right? And who really does it, right? So.
Yeah, well, it just looks like for the next 36 months anyway, these players are going to be flogged into the ground. And, I realize as well that this isn't always a subject that people want to listen to or talk about or whatever. But, we've lost Timber. If one of our, favorite players picks up an injury throughout this season, that is probably because of the schedule, and it's not just the physical schedule. Players can get tired mentally as well, and they make a wrong decision. They make a bad decision in a challenge or something like that. You can be the guy who makes the challenge or the guy who's on the wrong end of the challenge. It's not just about, my hamstring is gone or my ACL or whatever. There are other aspects to this too, but, football is eating itself before our very eyes, and the demand is there. People want it. And as long as people want it, people will get it because there are people out there who are in power who will give it to them. So Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Martin Odegaard. In a world in which transfer fees have gone absolutely insane. I think it's not unreasonable to say that.
Yeah.
How incredible a piece of business does it look that we got this player from Real Madrid for 30 million or 35 million, whatever it might be. When you see, again, I realize this is Chelsea doing the Chelsea thing that nobody can really get their head around, but they're paying 60 plus million for Romeo Lavia, who's 19 years of age, who's played one season in the Premier League, and we've gone and got one of the best playmakers in Europe. Taking a chance, maybe, but talk of a new contract for him and an extended deal. It is unquestionably one of the most important things that Arsenal have got to get done still, I think. Yeah. They've done really well. They've got Saka tied down, Martinelli, William Saliba, Gabriel. We'll talk about him in a sec, maybe. But Martin Odegaard, captain of the club, high performer, a guy who's only going to get better and more influential. And, hopefully this is one they can get over the line pretty quickly.
Mate, when you mentioned his name, I thought, do you know something I don't? but actually, I don't. I'm not worried about it.
No.
And because we're pretty comfortable in what we're building, and he's a key part of that, and has been made a key part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not worried about it. But I remember doing podcasts and discussing who should we get, Buendia, Maddison, or Odegaard, and we were just debating it.
Yes,
that debate feels ridiculous now, doesn't it? And that just shows you how someone can improve and influence the club in a positive way. And he's an absolute role model for the club. An absolute role model, and I think his influence is yet to be fully told by people within the club to the outside world. That I just think he's been an exceptional captain. The only thing that's going to seal the deal is when he's lifting something over his head, right? And I think that's when people realise, that's what you get judged on against our historic captains. And he's an absolutely brilliant captain. We'll just do the final piece now so that can be solidified.
Yes, trophies. There was a clip, I think it was from the Community Shield. I can't remember if it was when we won the penalty shootout or when Trossard's goal went in, but he was over celebrating with the fans. And he did this on, did the thing on his badge, but he was just shouting at them, believe. Yeah. And, he seemed like a shy kid when he arrived at first, didn't he?
Yeah.
And there were questions about, should he be the captain? Is he the right choice to be the captain? Is he the right kind of personality to be the captain? And I think there are elements of Arteta in him, if you like. That sort of steeliness that isn't necessarily on the surface, but deep down, to go to Real Madrid at 15 you've got to have some measure of self-belief to do that, even if, there are probably other reasons behind it, or there's a big sell, a big push. This is what we're going to do for you. This is the biggest club in the world. All of that kind of stuff. You still have to back yourself to go to Real Madrid. And look, ultimately it didn't work out for him, but that can happen to lots of players at lots of clubs. But he's come to Arsenal, and I think the development of him, not only as a player, but as a character, has been absolutely fantastic. And Arteta talking about, maybe it was during his loan spell, and he said something along the lines of, Martin needs to get in the box more and score more goals. And nobody really thought about that as part of who he was, because he's got this wand of a left foot. So you're thinking, well, get him in there, let him thread those balls through for the likes of Saka, Martinelli, whoever it might be. And we didn't really see him as that, but he's combined those two things in a really efficient and end producty way. There's the technical term.
Yeah, it works for me. Yeah, I think he shares a lot of the continuous improvement mindset Arteta has to push himself to the absolute limit to improve.
Yeah.
He looks like one of those guys, first in, last out, doesn't he? And that's what he wants. Arteta wants more of those guys, and people that really want to ask questions about how they can improve, want to learn, want to influence, want to lead. And I did, in the Man City game, in some of the big games, he has sometimes gone a bit quiet in some of the big games. And I was really impressed with him in the last 20, actually, that when the game was a little bit rocky, that's when he stood up. I think that's something that we need to do more of if you want to win the big moments. We're having one big gap analysis in our minds, aren't we, about last year to this year? And that's the thing we want to really change. When momentums are going against us, can we change those momentums back in our favour? And what do we need to do? How do we extract more performance from ourselves? And he leads the way in that. We do everything he does. First over the top on the press, first showing for the ball from deep, turning around and getting us going. And a very vital player.
Here's a story that's doing the rounds at this moment in time. We talked about selling. We talked about the need to bring in money. Following Balogun and Spurs. I mean, where do you stand on this? Because I'm absolutely like, go fuck yourselves. And while you're going and fucking yourselves, go fuck yourselves a little bit more. Like, I recognize our need to bring in money. I recognize how useful that might be. I also recognize that Balogun is one of our more valuable options, but I couldn't countenance that. I just couldn't.
I don't want to look at my screen because I'm going to upset myself. But,
it's just a rumour, in fairness, doing the rounds, but
there's also a rumour of Fulham as well, isn't there, out there, a little one. I'm not sure how that is. And the Monaco one, I want that to reappear because I watched Monaco. I think he would suit them really well, and not a bad place to live, is it, Andrew?
No.
So I think that'll be that suits my brain, shall we say? If they can find the money. And I just think a lot of these stories are to be told. The next 2 to 3 weeks, mate, is going to be incredible. As the poker starts and people really start to look at what they have. Watching the games last weekend, how many incomplete teams did you see? We saw the high-profile teams, obviously Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United. Talk about them. None of them are complete, are they?
No.
We say. West Ham, what are they doing? The teams that are supposedly be at the bottom, they now had a first taste and thinking, crikey, that player can't cut it, so we need to change him. And that's where you're going to see things move the next 2-3 weeks. No need to do it now. But soon you're going to say, look, if we want to stay here or stay in this league, we got to build on this. And this is where,
Yeah.
It's almost like, this is a discovery exercise for a lot of these clubs. And that's why I think the market will move soon.
The existential threat, if you want to call it that, of Saudi Arabian money is something that the Premier League is having to deal with. Some clubs are obviously benefiting from that. Newcastle, for example, in terms of ownership, but also getting a massive fee for a player who would not have got that much money if he'd gone elsewhere. There are whispers about Gabriel and Saudi Arabia. Do you take at face value, 100% face value, the idea that the team selection last weekend against Nottingham Forest was tactical and maybe not influenced by something else, because, after 73 games consecutive starting, he's left on the bench, and a day later these stories about interest from Saudi Arabia start to emerge. The player's agent is somebody, who we've had some concerns about in the past. He is, in the Kia Jurrien stable, if you like. Do you have any worries about that?
I'm trying to ignore these worries because I think...
that means you have them.
I'm trying to ignore them because I like the player a lot. So obviously his partnership with Saliba has been life-changing for us, shall we say. Right? And when they're on the pitch, we're not bad. So I'm trying to ignore this. But it feels so left field that it makes you think, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Tactically, I completely dismissed it by saying to myself, Notts Forest had the lowest possession stats of all last season. We're going to have the ball. We don't need that, our best defender, who's probably our worst build-up player. Let's add another build-up player into the mix to completely dominate them and win the game. Which sort of happened until they scored, and we whipped Gabriel on the pitch in 2.2 seconds later, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
So and then you realise how important he is. So I explained it away to myself last weekend, but he still hasn't gone away. And it brings me back to that unpredictability of what Saudi Arabia can do. And I mentioned this earlier, and I've got to mention it again because it's really important. The Saudi Arabian transfer window doesn't close when our window closes. And it's going to be so interesting to see what happens, And it's, I think, Andrew, it's 2 to 3 weeks after. And so,
just looking it up here, just in case.
Yeah, and that is going to cause problems, right? And so it's going to make people think there's another place for players to go. So we used to send them to Turkey when our window shut just after, didn't we? They go to Turkey like a day or so later.
That's right.
But what's going to happen if that's accurate? What's going to happen is we're going to start to see a number of players go to different clubs potentially, because we're not the only ones with a bit of lucky sitting in the departure lounge. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not the only ones, and there's going to be a number of players who are going to want to play. They're going to want to play, and that could be a way to playing, even if it's a loan deal. And that's going to create a swell of Premier League players going to Saudi Arabia that we maybe didn't expect, at an age we didn't expect.
Yeah.
And that will give them a sort of basis for next summer. And then what? Then the Gabriel story we may not be able to dismiss so easily.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
It's the 20th of September is when the Saudi Arabian transfer window closes. I mean, I am reminded of what happened in golf, and the way that came into being. And then the compromise, if you like, was an amalgamation. And I think football is a bit too big and a bit too complicated to, and individualistic as well, because of individual players and what have you. But this is a threat to the Premier League, because until now, Premier League has been the richest league in the world, basically the richest league in Europe. And look, there was the Chinese league a while back, and they threw a lot of money around, and then they stopped doing that. But I don't think that's going to happen here. I don't think that this is like a flash in the pan kind of thing. It's not going to go away. We're a bit tired of this now. We'll give it up, in 6 months' time. I don't know that that's the case. So it is going to be something that I think we have to contend with. And Arteta's made a couple of comments recently about the market. There are things that we can control and things that we can't control. And the market is one of those things. And the market now isn't just other Premier League teams. It isn't trying to get the best deal possible from a team in France or a team in Spain or a team in Germany for a player you no longer want. They have to set themselves up now to expect Saudi Arabian clubs to come in and pay big fees and huge money to players to attract them there in the first place. And footballers can make all kinds of connections with clubs and fan bases and cities. They go there, they might feel at home and all the rest of it, but they're all very aware that this is an extremely short career.
Yeah.
And there are no bonus points really for loyalty. There's no bonus points or dollars in the bank or anything like that for for sticking around just because you like a place. And I'm not saying that's the only motivation, but I think it is something that Arsenal and other clubs are really going to have to pay attention to and deal with, because these, if you want to call them threats, because I feel like it is a threat when somebody comes and wants to take one of your best players, whether it's Manchester City or whether it's a club in Saudi Arabia, it's a threat to you and your organization. This is a threat that they're going to have to take very, very seriously.
I think so, Andrew. They're not going away. World Cup 2030 or 34, that's their goal. I heard something today, I just read it briefly, so I need to validate it, but that the Saudi League want a Champions League place in the next couple of years. If that happens, that changes things. Now, of course, there's UEFA rules around financial fair play, which we know are so robust.
Yeah.
And the penalties are so severe, that's going to really keep them in order. And so, but it starts to signpost the potential end game, and then you create a competition route, which is similar. Then we started talking earlier, didn't we, about overplaying players. Well, what if they can say to a player, we can give you more money, but the league's only 18 clubs. Do you know what I'm saying? You see what I mean? And you're not having to play 60 games a season here. Suddenly, as a Premier League, you have to look at your conditions of the people that work with you. Then you might start to take games out of the calendar. And that's what happened in golf. Liv created a situation where the other golf, the PGA had to look at the amount of tournaments they had, the amount of travel the players had, and they realised they couldn't compete. These guys have the ability to buy not just golf and football, but to buy sport. The whole of sport that they want to buy, they can do it. Tennis, boxing, the lot. If they want it, they can have it. That's the sort of money we're talking about. They're going for football. Why? The reach is so global. Yeah. Millions and millions and millions of people follow this game on a daily basis. And so why not? That's the best way to reinvent yourself. This is gonna dominate our conversation, Andrew, in the next couple of years. I promise you that. It's not going away.
What do you make of Neymar going to Saudi Arabia? On the one hand, it sort of feels inevitable.
Yeah.
Given the previous choice that he made, because I think if you leave Barcelona for PSG, you've played your hand, or you've shown, who you are, what your priority is in sporting terms anyway, right? So ending up in Saudi Arabia for vast amounts of money makes an awful lot of sense. At the same time, he's still, a global star and all the rest of it. I mean, maybe not so much what you think of his move there, but what you think of how his career has played out when you think of the sheer talent and the sheer ability that he had and the choices that he has made as a footballer.
Yeah, he made a call early, didn't he, to separate himself away from Barcelona, which had probably, that whole move has wrecked that club, hasn't it? Around issues around Neymar arriving at Barcelona, how it happened, and then him leaving Barcelona has caused him so many political issues. Goes to PSG, doesn't quite achieve, not quite as professional as he once was. If anything, I'm surprised it took him so long to get to Saudi Arabia. Honestly, because you can see that he's almost semi-retired anyway when it comes to the football, which is a real shame because the memories we have, and I'm one of those the Barcelona teams are some of my favourite teams. What they produce, I can't disguise it. The football that they had during Pep's era and then followed on was just the best I've ever seen. And he was part of some of those teams. It feels a real shame that sharp player, that super sharp carrying player that had everything has just stopped. And maybe it's a byproduct of, the Gareth Bale syndrome, right? You have so much, and you've won most things. The motivation is not always easy to find for everybody, and unless you live in their shoes and in the bubble which they live in, I'm sort of loath to criticise, because what do you do when you've achieved everything financially, you've achieved most things on the pitch, and then someone's offering more money at you? It's very, very, very difficult to keep that edge, mate. Keep that edge.
Yeah. One man maybe just straying away from Arsenal who has made a different decision for now is Michael Olise, who won't be in Crystal Palace's team when we face them on Monday, but was linked with Chelsea. Chelsea apparently had activated a clause in his contract. It looked like they were going to buy yet another player, but he signed a new deal at Crystal Palace. I mean, clearly what Chelsea are trying to do is just stockpile as many good young players as possible. I mean, they're going to face some shit down the line when they're trying to get rid of guys with 6 or 7 years left on their contract who haven't worked out, but that's their problem. And as and when it happens, I will laugh heartily at them. But that's kind of almost like a feel-good story, isn't it? Which is a kind of bit weird. He's got a brand new contract at Crystal Palace, but I was slightly heartened when I saw that. I thought, well, fuck, not everything is buyable yet. Anyway, maybe down the line, of course, and maybe Arsenal will be the ones who do it. But I like that story.
Oh, I totally agree. I felt like some form of sanity had returned.
Just a smidgen of common sense in the world.
Like somebody thinking, well, hold on, they've got players that play on the wing. Why they? I wanted him to say that to me. I mean, they've got players that play my position, even some of them with a left foot like me. So why am I going to put my career under threat there? And I'm so glad that's worked out the way it's worked out, because that's what matches my thinking. But I'm also aware that some people, the contract lengths are so long. When you sign on that line, you are made for life immediately. And that is very difficult for people to turn away from. The problem becomes Chelsea's problem when they want to sell you at a certain point. But when you sign, you're guaranteed that money. It's not like the NFL when a portion of your money is guaranteed. You are guaranteed that money in its entirety.
Do you think, just sort of bring it back around to the schedule kind of thing, so as the burden on players increases, they, as much as anybody, are going to be aware of that. Yeah. They know how quickly an injury can strike and what kind of an impact it can have on your career, So, player gets injured, comes back, great. Some players get injured, never quite the same again. Yeah, their career trajectory, which is on the up, either plateaus or goes down. So, I mean, do you think that might be part of why, certain players have been, okay, I will sign this 8-year deal. If they're mad enough to give me 8 years at this amount of money, I'll fucking take it, even if it's not necessarily the best footballing decision I might make about how to get the most out of my talent. What's the team that suits me right now? What is the club that suits me right now? I think we've seen players go to Chelsea and, is it really the best place to be? Is it really, what's attracting you to that club right now? Is it it's no European football? Is it it's crazy hedge fund manager owner? I think we know. But maybe part of the rationale in their minds is, well, short career, someone gives me a kick in the knee tomorrow, I'm fucked. And I've got this security at this club.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to watch the two cultures against each other. So you got at Arsenal, you've got, I'll tell you what, we're now going to lift the level of our squad competition. And actually, we don't want hardly any of you to feel secure on the sporting angle. Then you got Chelsea handing out 8-year contracts with a 1-year option, which I always find quite interesting.
Yeah.
And they are offering security. Now, while you have a player that's playing and is quite happy, that security feels good and you're getting value. But when a player may be losing a little bit of form and then he thinks, well, you know what? I have my contract. That problem with my lack of form is now your problem, club.
Yeah.
It's your problem because I've got 7 years to go. And that's where you start to maybe lose a competitive edge. At this moment in time, Chelsea are running a very nice people factory. And they're selling and buying as they see fit. And they found a loophole in the rules, accounting rules, and they're maximizing it. And they have got some talent. Will it all fit? To be confirmed. But on the human side, this is a game of competition. and you're looking for the marginal gains of 5%ers, and I'm not sure they're going to find that in a group of people who've got 8-year contracts in the back pocket. I'm not sure, Andrew. I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I'm hoping that they have collected a baker's dozen of Winston Bogarts, to be perfectly honest. But let's
the name he did pass through my mind as well.
Exactly. Let's see how it all plays out. Right, we had better leave it there. I've taken up far too much of your time, Clive. A pleasure as always.
Mate, loved it. You always take me places where I don't, where we weren't expecting to go. Really enjoyed that, mate.
Thank you very much indeed to Clive. You can find him on Twitter. He is at ClivePAFC, at ClivePAFC. And of course, you can hear more of him on the Arsenal Vision podcast, which I'm sure you're all subscribed to. But if you're not, you should do it because it is good. So that is just about that for this week's show. I did mention, of course, that we are playing on Monday night, Crystal Palace in the Premier League. We will preview that game for our Patreon members. First, I'll be talking to Dan from HLTCO about the game, of course, their summer transfers and the season that lies ahead for them. And then, as usual, myself and Lewis will look ahead to the game from an Arsenal perspective. That will be out for you Friday afternoon. If you're not already a member, you can sign up right now. It's patreon.com/Arseblog, patreon.com/Arseblog. Instant access to all of our content on there. A Premier League preview podcast, Champions League preview podcast, loads more besides. So patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, have yourselves a great weekend. Let's hope everyone that we want to lose this weekend loses and loses badly. Keep fingers crossed for that. We'll catch you on the next one, folks. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. Hello there, good afternoon. I am looking for some foam, please. I need a new foam cover for a Shure SM7B microphone. The old one's got a bit, worse for wear, so to speak. So I'm in the market for some brand new foam. What? What do you mean? That can't be right. So you're telling me that some American guy called Todd came in here and bought every single bit of foam that you had and every single bit of foam that you will have for the next 8 years with an option for one more year after that? That's insane. Well, I'm not surprised your husband thinks he's a foam trafficker. He's just not very good at it, though, is he? That's not how you traffic. Anyway, thank you for your help. I'll go next door. He's bought all their foam too. Fucking hell. Right, well, I guess there's nothing else to it but to order online. What do you mean he bought the internet?